welcome to today's Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break, where we are thrilled to offer the fourth and sadly final installment of a series brought to us by the Deaconess Foundation on workforce and workforce development in our region. The Deaconess Foundation supports people in need as they build careers to sustain themselves and their families. Introducing today's session and our special guest, Danielle Crawford, we are pleased to welcome Kathy Belk, who is the president and CEO of the Deaconess Foundation and who has spent her career focused on economic mobility, most recently at Jumpstart, and now, of course, at the Deaconess Foundation. She's a proud Leadership Cleveland alum and a CLC board member. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Marianne. I'm Kathy Belk. As Marianne said, I'm the president of the Deaconess Foundation, where our mission is to help people impacted by poverty build careers which sustain themselves and their families. This is our last Way Forward Leader Lunch Break. As we said, the objective of these has been to share with you the landscape of the Northeast Ohio labor market and the resources available to employers and to job seekers so we can all have a strong workforce and our companies can grow. In the archives, you can see the first three leader lunch breaks who spoke in this area. Our leaders were Jacob Doritsky, Michelle Rose, and Bethia Burke. But today I'd like to introduce Danielle Crawford, the VP of Grantmaking at Deaconess Foundation, where I am a colleague of Danielle's. She's going to tell you more about one of the sources of innovation for the workforce system and some of the innovations we have going on right here in Greater Cleveland. Regarding Danielle herself, she's been at the Deaconess Foundation now for 6 months. She joined the foundation from the United Way of Greater Cleveland, where she was most recently the director of Grantmaking and Community Partnerships. Prior to her time at that esteemed establishment, she was living in Detroit, where she held roles in grants management at the Skillman Foundation, and she was a public policy fellow at the Council of Michigan Foundations. She's a proud graduate of Shaker Heights High School, as well as that school up north, the University of Michigan, where she received a BA in history and classical archaeology, and also where she received a master's degree in teaching at Bard College in New York. She's a graduate of Leadership Detroit, as well as the Cleveland Bridge Builders. Please welcome Danielle.
Thanks so much, Kathy. I'm going to share my screen. Thanks for that warm welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to be here with you. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Danielle Crawford, and I'm the Vice President of Grantmaking here at Deaconess. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Cleveland workforce system and what new approaches we're finding success with. Back in 2015, the workforce system in Cleveland had a number of good, effective organizations doing really good work. But there were so many residents of the city and county who were either unemployed or underemployed. And there were so many employers who couldn't find people they needed for their positions. The county executive at the time, Armin Budish, and his chief of staff, Sharon Sobel Jordan, now president and CEO of United Way of Greater Cleveland, wanted to create a change and improvement at a different scale. They convened a large group of philanthropic partners, stakeholders, as well as service providers. The group has evolved, and today, 8 years later, is still working with the goal of driving systems change, as well as system improvement and innovation for the workforce system. The group is a public-private philanthropic partnership made up of the 10 organizations you see on the screen before you. We also work with many other funders on initiatives together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our desired impact, which is fourfold. First, our first desired impact is to reduce unfilled positions in important industries. These industries are both those which are important to our economy and those which are offering good jobs for hourly employees with paid time off, jobs with benefits, as well as a career pathway, so individuals can advance and make family-sustaining wages. Second, we want to increase access to good jobs and career opportunities for workers. We want to make these good jobs available to people who may have been involved with, say, the criminal justice system, who potentially don't have a 4-year degree, and who also may need a flexible schedule for their work. Third impact is that we want to close the racial income and employment gap faced by Black and Latinx workers in the county. So the first thing I want to say about that is that we know there's a lot of research out there that says that Black and Latinx workers don't make the same wages as their white counterparts, are more often in lower wage jobs, as well as have the greatest barriers to going up career pathways. Fourth and finally, we want to drive long-term structural improvements. This means that we want to change long-term behaviors and partnerships among existing organizations, not just add new things, which will add more activities, which will cost more money inevitably. So let's talk about what these workforce funders group focused on. The first systems change innovation this group focused on is called a sector partnership. I'm going to take a minute to explain what a sector partnership is. This is a model of workforce development and a model that was being used in cities across the United States for decades, but not being used in Cleveland. The Workforce Funders Group generated funding and sent out RFPs in order to start the first organized sector partnerships in Greater Cleveland. And we have them in 3 industries that you can see on your screen here: manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. We have a sector partnership as a model, which starts by gathering employers from the same sector or industry. The idea is to accumulate all their job needs and then share what those needs are at scale back to the nonprofit partners, such as a Towards Employment or a Tri-C. So as they work with individuals seeking skills and jobs, they know which jobs are in demand. A huge strategy for the Workforce Funders Group is to not only start these sector partnerships, but to scale them as well, meaning ensuring job seekers, including adults, as well as those who have graduated from high school, know about the jobs and are able to access good jobs in these industries. This also means for employers having a steady stream of talent. So I'm sure you guys are wondering, how are things going with these sector partnerships for the Workforce Funders? So last year, more than 800 workers were able to secure employment with good jobs through the sector partnerships in manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. 64% of those 800 were Black workers, and 50% of them were women. And also, as of the end of 2022, 100 employers are now engaged with the sector partnership, which is a great accomplishment. This is important because while employers are now better connected to the talent they need, they are also working together to improve their own workplaces and making themselves places where workers want to be and want to work. Employers are also changing some of their policies they've had in place, which were true barriers to people being hired. Some of these changes are as follows: improving reentry hiring policies such as ban the box, removing high school graduation requirements when they are unnecessary, as well as removing non-smoking requirements. There are also significant changes being made at the structural level. Our training programs have been adapted to address what employers need from a practical perspective. And there's much more integration of the wraparound services that help people address very real barriers to access. Lastly, these sector partnerships have been earning money to help scale their work. Lots of it from the federal government, as well as from organizations outside of our region. So what is our focus for 2023 and 24? It's also fourfold. So first, we want to expand workers' access to careers. We want to make sure that everyone who wants can have access not only to the technical skills needed for a career, but also to all of the other experiences needed, such as work experiences, which make them very employable. One example of this is in IT, where there's a new apprenticeship program for people who have graduated from high school or a boot camp who need extra experience in real life IT projects before they will have the skills needed to be hired at an IT firm. Our second focus for 23 and 24 is supporting advancement of current workers. We want people in entry-level roles to have advancement opportunities. This is working well in the healthcare space, specifically with the healthcare sector partnership, which is working on programs to better enable hospital food service workers as well as valet workers to enter into programs where they can make money where they can make more money as a lab tech or the like. The third is boosting youth career exposure. This is particularly important for us for ensuring people graduating from CMSD as well as our other area high schools know a lot about the careers in the industries and can be connected to those employers as well. One example here is Magnet, which has developed many new programs to give students exposure first, then experiences in manufacturing. And our last focus for 23 and 24 is continuing to support systemic and employer policies changes to increase racial equity. This, for example, is about working with employers to eliminate policies which disproportionately impact communities of color. For example, automatically eliminating a population because of their interaction with the criminal justice system. On this slide, you can see the goals for these partnerships in terms of quantitative metrics. This work is scaling and will impact more county and city residents each year. On that, I want to say that I only have one more slide, so if you're starting to have questions, please start to get them ready. So I want to go back now to talk about the Workforce Funders Group with the work underway. With the work underway, the group is now seeing how else it can be helpful in the workforce community. What you see here is an example of the work the group is paying attention to or actively working on this year. So first, let me give you an orientation of this page. We're going to start at the bottom of the page in the bottom left-hand corner where it says track key community initiatives and topics. And then you move to the far right as we get more involved with what's on the screen. The Workforce Funders Group first pays attention to what others want to do in the community, learns about what needs are, and develops an understanding. Then, if they think there's a role for the group, the initiative moves to the right of the bottom of the screen, with the Workforce Funders Group getting more involved. You can also see at the far right, where it says commit resources, that this is where the group invests both its own financial resources and the most significant time for projects and work. There's also 2 rows above this where you see sector partnerships and sector strategies. You can see the group knows that there are lots of benefits of working within a sector, whether that be a sector partnership or something else, as you can see on the screen here. The second row is then all the other strategies we want to undertake for systems change. These are just some of the initiatives that we're paying attention to or involved with, as there are others, of course. But it gives you an idea, a flavor of how we think about the work of innovating in the system and driving systems change for Greater Cleveland. With all of that said, I am happy to take any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Danielle, thank you so much. So let's start by talking a little bit about what are some of those challenges that employers are seeing in the community with filling the jobs, and some of those innovations, how are they working to connect the workers to jobs?
Sure. So how are they working to connect workers to jobs? And what was the first part of your question again? I'm sorry.
Just kind of are some of those challenges in kind of filling the jobs that are available?
Sure. So some of the challenges are within the areas that I spoke about, which are banning the box, which is re-entry, the re-entry population getting access to good quality jobs, first of all. Then there's also banning or not having a non-smoking policy. We know that's been a challenge for some, being able to fill jobs, but relaxing that policy. And then finally, relaxing the policy of like saying you need to have a high school diploma as opposed to a GED or the like, or experience in the field as opposed to one of those things. Those are all ways in which it's been challenging, I would say, for employers to attract talent. But with relaxing of some of those policies, we've seen more folks be able to be attracted into these industries. And then you had a second part of the question, I'm sorry.
Just some of the ways in which we're trying to work through those challenges to connect workers to the jobs.
Sure. Some of the ways we're trying to work through those challenges. We're working through those challenges at the as well as at the policy level with things like ban the box, but we know that's not enough. We know we have to go beyond things like ban the box, because you ban the box and then it could essentially be seen as kicking the can down the road, which is something that we don't want to do. But it has to start at the policy level, I would say, and ensuring that that the policies are working for workers, right? So it's important to think about things like that.
Can you tell us more about the sector partnership around childhood education?
Sure. So I will first say that there's not a sector partnership around childhood education. It's I can always go back to that screen, but it is one of our areas of focus, I would say, as opposed to an actual sector partnership. We know that within early childhood education, what we're talking about there is daycare workers, preschool workers, those that are caring for children. We know that that industry is an enabling industry. It enables others to do their work. If you say don't have childcare, or childcare workers aren't being paid a living wage and we don't have enough childcare workers, then those that are in other industries are not enabled to do their work. So we know it's an enabling industry, which is why it's super important and why we're focusing on it now. There are a few partners that have come together to talk about, not just talk about, but take action on that particular industry for workers. And we are working on that right now to help address the barriers and challenges to working in early childhood work.
Looking at the sector partnerships, kind of the early ones on board were probably the easiest to secure. How do you envision growing your partnerships as you continue on?
That's a really good question. So we know the sector partnerships are manufacturing, healthcare, and IT that we're currently working with that exist, the 3 sector partnerships that exist right now. I think ways in which we can grow those sector partnerships are to bring more employers, engage with more employers who are interested in doing this work, that are seeing the success of existing seeing the success of existing employers that are having with hiring individuals by relaxing their policies, by working with individuals that may have a background that is impacted by criminal justice, by working with individuals that need supports, need wraparound services, need 360 services. All of these things, I think once the employers that we're engaging with, which is over 100 employers as of the end of last year, when we see those employers, when other employers see those employers working, like the system working for them, I think that's when we will be able to grow and expand and have more employers be engaged with our work.
On your final slide, there was a note about the transportation equity, and we've heard the stories about folks having challenges getting from where they live to where the jobs are and taking multiple buses for many hours. Can you talk a little bit more about the focus around transportation equity?
So transportation is a challenging topic, and I would say that it's something that we are aware of. It is on our radar. We are looking at it. We know how important it is, but beyond that, I would say right now, I would have to get additional resources to go outside of this conversation, which I'm happy if whoever asked that question wants to give their contact information to Rachel, please do, and I will follow up with Rachel after this and get you the answer to that question.
There's also a lot of conversations around talent attraction and retention in Cleveland. How do these innovations and the work that you are focusing on help to attract talent here, but also keep our talent here?
The innovations. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think Cleveland is a great city to live in. I'm personally a boomerang. I moved back here for many reasons, being it was a lower cost to live here, and it was the cost of living was lower in Cleveland than a lot of other cities, which was a major factor of me wanting to move back. And then I would also say innovations that we're using to work with individuals. We're also working with individuals on important innovations, such as what else are we working on? We're working on individuals with innovations to keep them here, but I think it's important to think about how we're attracting talent to Cleveland and then how we're keeping that talent here, right? And so if we're working on how we're attracting the talent and how we're keeping the talent here, it's important to continue noodling on and thinking about. So I think it's something that we're constantly thinking about within the sector partnerships, as well as the industries that we're working in outside of that. But it is something that we are working on.
Yeah, there are often challenges when there are language barriers within the workplace. How are companies working to address these issues?
Yeah, so I've actually seen examples of this in real time where companies will send individuals to talk to job training programs, and they send an individual that is bilingual or trilingual. So the person can talk to the class in a number of languages that are important to them, that is giving access to the people that are in those classes. So that's one thing that I've seen employers take on, which is in one instance, like that was one instance, but I know there are other instances of that happening where companies are working with individuals to help them with their language barriers. So I know that's something that I've seen in real time in action, which was great to see.
What are some of the greatest challenges you face in implementing the strategies?
Really good question. Some of the challenges that I would say we face in implementing the strategies is that I would say it's not so much that they're challenges, I would say that they're opportunities for us to advance the work. So it's something like we have all come together to do the sector partnerships, and it's working really well. And I think a lot of what we're doing is helping other things catch up, such as policy and advocacy work, such as outdated policies that are antiquated, that are not serving our population anymore. I would say some of the other challenges that we're facing, opportunities, you can think about them either way. Some of them that we're facing are the language barrier that you just stated, like that is something that we're seeing that is often a challenge for individuals but we are also working on. Those are a couple examples.
So as we see the economy change, whether that's shrinking or growing, how are you thinking about future investments in workforce if labor market needs might not be as pressing?
What can you restate the second part of that question about how labor market needs might be as challenging?
Sure. So thinking about future investments in workforce, if some of the needs ebb and flow and new opportunities or new needs arise.
Okay. Yeah, so we want to remain nimble and responsive and flexible to things that arise in the community that people are either interested in, or we see industries emerging and rising to the top, bubbling up to the top. If there's a potential to make something else a sector partnership that makes sense at all the levels, I think that's a great idea. But I think it's also the Workforce Funders Group has done a great job of really moving things through a model or a theory of change where we're thinking through what is most important and what impacts can we have, right? So that's what I would say.
To know some other efforts across the community, such as United Way's social determinants of work work. So how are you partnering with them? What other efforts are you involved with?
Absolutely. So we support the social determinants of work. Absolutely. We're definitely at the table when discussions are happening about the social determinants of work. Other places that we're partnering with individuals would be, we work with outside of the Workforce Funders Group. We also work with our partners that are at the table, partners that work in both adult and youth employment services. And we also work with employers that are looking to change, employers that are looking to work with other employers to advance their jobs and make sure that individuals are supported, being hired, are being placed in what makes sense.
Danielle, you mentioned some of the goals and the work that's coming up over the next year. As you look ahead for the next 5+ years, what's the vision for the work of the Funders Group and where are you all headed?
That's a great question. I am not super comfortable answering that question, only because my tenure has been a little bit limited, and there have been others that have been doing this work much longer than I have. But I would say my desire for the Workforce Funders Group beyond the next 5 years, or within the next 5 years, is that we're growing and expanding, and we don't have to work on the same issues we're working on today. Like, if we were able to, and this sounds wild, but I'd want there to be a new set of issues, because we've solved all of these issues that are current and existing issues that we're working on, right? So it's important to think about what people want, and to ask people what they want, because workers know what they want better than anyone else, I would say.
Danielle, we have time for one more question. So for those of us on the call that want to learn more, that want to support these efforts, how do we do so?
Absolutely. So if you would like to learn more, you can reach out to me at Crawford at Deaconess Foundation, deaconessfdn.org. I'll put my email in the chat. And you can also reach out to Kathy if you're so inclined, if you have a relationship with her as well. And we are happy to get out your questions or comments or concerns to the appropriate party as it stands.
Thanks so much, Danielle, for spending time with us and sharing the insights into all the great work that you are doing at Deaconess. And thank you, Kathy, for making this partnership possible. Anybody who participated in any part of the series certainly learned a great deal, and we're very appreciative.